Now, okay, now I'm going to go back to my earlier point about the fact that I'm hooking up with some of my former people I knew a long time ago, running Commodore-based systems in the 80s, and we were playing around with modems back then, and we would log on to each other's BBSs. Now, I have to say, I'm really disappointed that they all end up, as far as I can tell, they all ended up running some type of Microsoft Windows system. And Commodore, with all their faults, they did a pretty good job of disseminating information about their hardware. So all the hardware was pretty much documented down to the register level. Now, they're just not doing that nowadays, and I really don't like it. But anyways, that's what happened. And so, like, I'm on Facebook, and I'm not saying that, I really love Facebook all that much, but it's a nice way to stay in contact with people that may have moved away, and it's a decent enough way of staying in contact with people. Now, that is a bit of a sticking point, but everybody has everybody has to make their own choices. I can't force them to think like I do, and I was disappointed, but that's all I can say about it. Really, is that I'm disappointed that the incuriosity of these people that I knew, they just didn't care. They didn't care about it. Just go with the flow, right? Even though they were former Commodore people, they didn't end up with that programmer mentality where they wanted to experiment with their systems. Okay, so what are the other alternatives? Okay, maybe some people don't like Linux. It's understandable. They prefer BSD. Fine. I run OpenBSD 4.7. I use the ICE window manager on a system with 256 megs of RAM, and I'm completely happy with it. I think it's good. There's no reason why I can't run BSD along with my Linux. Most of my computers are Linux-based systems, but there's absolutely no reason why. I tried OpenBSD. I like it. It's fine. Thumbs up for OpenBSD. No problem. Definitely worth running. Definitely worth checking out. Now, the other alternatives there are, and there's quite a few of them. There's Haku, which came from BEOS or BOS, and some people don't like Haku. One of the reasons why I tried it and it worked. Basically, it worked. Network works, video worked. I didn't really give it a super thorough test, but basically everything. Sending email, receiving email, using IRC, basically doing the stuff that I usually do on a day-to-day basis on the computer, everything worked. So I can't really complain about it. But what some people don't like about Haku is the fact that it has a C++ kernel. So in other words, the kernel is written in C++. They don't like that. Some people don't like it. They prefer it to be written in C. And I can't really argue with that. I basically agree with that. But it's very unlikely that I will do any kernel hacking on Haku. But Haku is interesting. It's certainly interesting enough to try it out. It's another alternative to the homogeneous Windows landscape we have now, and we're starting to see lots of different alternatives. Okay, another alternative, just quickly, is Minix. Now they're up to 3.1.8, which is a microkernel. It's different from Linux because the microkernel is much smaller than the monolithic kernel of Linux. And some people say that that's more robust. It probably is more robust. And it runs the X Windows system, and it has a BSD type license. And it's good for educators too. And it's still available. It runs on a whole bunch of different CPUs, and it's good, although I really didn't get into, honestly, I didn't really get into Minix, but it is definitely a worthy alternative. If you're checking out different systems, definitely check Minix out, and also check Haku out. They're both definitely worth it. Now if we get into a little bit more obscure territory, there is an assembler x86 OS. I use the 32-bit version called Minuet OS, MENUET OS. which is licensed under the GPL, and it really didn't run properly for me. I have to say it didn't run 100% correctly on my hardware. Now on somebody else's hardware it would probably work fine. So probably doesn't work on a large variety of hardware as well as some of the other systems I've mentioned. But it is an assembler OS, so I assume that excuse me, I assume that it runs fast, you know, as it's written in assembler. So that is an interesting system to check out if you have the time. There's also something called MicOS, which I just learned about, and it's an educational operating system. Now it's a very simple operating system from my understanding, and you could possibly learn the entire system, where, you know, it's just very, very difficult to learn an entire operating system inside and out. There's so much code, it's almost impossible. Whereas something like MicOS, you could sit down and possibly learn something about operating systems and poke around in the source code. It has a BSD-like license, so a license similar to BSD. Okay, so I also mentioned OpenBSD. I tried Plan9 from Bell Labs, and all I can say about Plan9 is it's strange. If you really want to see something different, try Plan9. It's open source, and it's just strange. That's all I can say about it. And I really wasn't able to make it do what I wanted to do. I couldn't really make it function properly. You know, that's probably mostly my ignorance with Plan9 than anything bad about Plan9. So someday I'll try it again just to see. Okay, so I've talked about Haku, Minix, Minuet, MicOS, OpenBSD, Plan9. What else? Okay, there is something called ReactOS. Now, ReactOS is very interesting. It's the plan for ReactOS is that it will be binary compatible with Windows NT systems versions 5.x and up. So I guess that means anything Windows 2000 or newer. Windows 2000, Windows XP, Windows 7. So that's interesting, you know, because then the Windows people, they could possibly just go over to ReactOS and say, okay, well, I don't need to be dependent on Microsoft. I can just use ReactOS. Now the problem with that is that ReactOS is not really ready yet. Okay, hopefully someday it will be, but that's what I'm hearing about it. And I look at it, and it looks very similar to Windows, of course. And you know, I hope that ReactOS succeeds, actually, because that would be another way for people to get their big toe dipped into the water, so to speak, so they can start trying an open source operating system. So there's lots of good ones out there, you know. Okay, now what else? There's AROS. Now I ran AROS on a Panasonic Toughbook, and I did have some problems with it. I really, really wanted to like AROS because being a former Amiga 500 owner, I wanted to check this out because a lot of people, you know, Linux and Unix is multi-user. AROS is not. It's just single user. It's much more closer to what Amiga OS was like in the old days. Now the problem with AROS that I had was that I had graphics corruption, and it didn't really run properly on any of the hardware I had, and I tried it on lots of different hardware. It worked best on the Panasonic Toughbook, but I couldn't get the network working. The network hardware on the Panasonic Toughbook was RTL 8139, and it works. I can tell you it will work on a system with an 8029 card, but the 8139 it wouldn't work, and I couldn't make it work, and I only had so much time and energy to devote to it. But I did want to like AROS, and I will definitely try AROS again, because, you know, it looks very promising. If they can get that working, that would be a way for the Amiga types, the former Amiga people, to run an Amiga-like OS on normal PC hardware. Again, in the case of the Panasonic Toughbook, it is actually a Pentium 4 running at 1.8 gigahertz. So it would just really fly on a system like that. Now I hear that the Acer Aspire 1 hardware will work really good with AROS. Now unfortunately I don't have an Acer Aspire 1 to try, which I believe is a netbook. I'm told that it will work really well on that system. So that's about it for now, and I hope that I've given people some food for thought. There's lots of alternatives out there to just Microsoft Windows. Okay, lots of interesting operating systems, and there's absolutely no reason why one of these couldn't run on a spare computer. If you have any interest at all in computers and you want to try something new, okay, I would recommend, honestly, I would recommend Haku, and I would recommend Vector Linux, and of course I recommend GNU Linux. You know, there's tons of distributions, pick one you like. And someday I hope AROS, if you have an Acer Aspire 1, thumbs up, you know, and that's another system to try. I'm definitely going to try that one. Now the other ones like ReactOS and Plan9 and Minuet OS, and to a large degree AROS, because I don't have compatible hardware, you're probably going to have some trouble with those. However, try them if you want. If you're adventurous enough, certainly give them a try. But I would basically what I stick with is OpenBSD and Linux. Those are my two bread and butter operating systems. Those are the two that I've had the most functionality with. And number one is, of course, Linux, because I have Linux computers all over the place. But I have to say that don't just get stuck in using one operating system. There's tons of other operating systems to try, and there's lots of interest, especially if you're a programmer, because you want to sink your teeth into that. You get to see all the source code. It's just endlessly fascinating. You know, you can do all the stuff. You can do all the stuff that you used to be able to do on your older computers, like the Amiga era, and more. Okay, now there's some things that probably still to this day that the old Amigas can do better. You know, and you can, if you want, you can get an Amiga 1200 from AmigaKit.com. So the door hasn't shut on Amiga yet. If you really want an Amiga, still old school Amiga or second generation Amiga, I guess I should say, you can still get it. So that's about it, and I hope I've given anybody listening to this blog some food for thought, and they try one of these other alternative operating systems. Thanks for listening.